MacArthur Park? Really? Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Wow. This is weird. And it's weird in the way that, like, I kind of want to get, like, I want a meticulous dissection of the making of this to figure out how we arrived at the final form that this actually took. Because, make no mistake, a Beetlejuice sequel of any kind has been in development hell for decades. Now, that doesn't mean they've been working on this version of the script for decades. That's usually not happens with development hell. Development hell means you are restarting from scratch over and over and over and over again more often than not, and that is very much the indication that has happened with this. And this, I'm not going to say that this is what happened. However, it feels like somebody put their foot down and said, if we don't get this out into theaters by the end of 2024, we will no longer commit to making this at all. And this feels like what was thrown together to meet a deadline. This feels, you know what? I was going to say this feels like a first draft script. It doesn't even feel like that. It feels like 2 or 3 first draft scripts stitched together. This is so weird. I'm mostly going to be pseudo-complaining. I'm going to say pseudo-complaining because there's only a handful of things that I can point to and go like, that's just bad. And then there's other stuff that I'm like, that's not bad, but why? So there is some good in here. Like, it is fun dwelling in this setting again. Visually, it recaptures what the first one did very, very well. I like the use of older style visual effects for a lot of this, like with the sandworms, there's still stop motion, slightly smoother stop motion than I recall, but there's still stop motion, and that's great. Same with some of the visual effects. There is definitely still some CGI that pops up now and then, but it's also largely done for stuff that, yeah, you probably couldn't have done that using older style effects, so like, cool, whatever. So visually, it's very nice. Michael Keaton slips back into this character pretty well. I don't mean this to sound like a criticism because it's been over 30 years, but he feels a little lower energy in this. I think that's inevitable, just given that he's not that young anymore. There's actually an interesting addition to the lore, and I know, like, Beetlejuice lore, but like seriously, because there's this introduction of this notion of where we've seen up to this point for the other side, the netherworld, whatever it is, basically gets established as a holding station. Like, that's not where you're supposed to stay. People end up there, but they are supposed to later go on to the great beyond, hellfire, something more eternal after this. This is not where you stay. This is where you hang for a bit, or maybe under certain circumstances have to work off some time before you're allowed to go on wherever else. And that actually is kind of interesting. And and not that I had an active question of like, is this really all the afterlife is? This is like just bureaucracy. But it does sort of answer that question for anyone who did have it. I kind of like that. So I praise Michael Keaton, the rest of the cast. Jenna Ortega does good. I mean, she slots in pretty seamlessly. Winona Ryder is doing good work. I don't love how Lydia's written, particularly. They do the fairly standard, let's revisit a character we haven't seen in a while thing, which is that her life has fallen apart. And just, is it such a bizarre concept that our hero from the previous story actually is doing okay, maybe not ideal, but like doing okay overall, and so the return of someone like Beetlejuice into her life is a threat to a nice life? Why is that such a bizarre concept? Why does her life have to kind of suck? Like that, I didn't love that, and there's a specific thing tied to that I'll get to. So there's that. Catherine O'Hara is good and fun. I feel like she's only half doing Lydia Dietz, and half doing Moira Rose, if you've seen Schitt's Creek. And like, I could buy that. I could buy Lydia. Sorry, no, not Lydia, because Lydia's the young one. Oh God, I can't think of her. I can't think of her character's first name. Mrs. Dietz. I don't know. I don't know. My brain's. I don't feel like looking it up. I have other stuff to do later. I'm trying to keep this short, but where I could buy Mrs. Dietz like becoming more like Moira in her old age. I could justify that as headcanon, but part of me still like, did you just play Moira for too long? Because it feels like that's bleeding into this. She's still good. She's still fun. So like that works. They have an interesting way of dealing with Jeffrey Jones and the fact that they were not going to bring him back. Good. Like they do use some images of him. Some people brought objection to that, but I'm pretty positive that every image we see of him is taken from a still from the previous movie, which they don't have to relicense. So he doesn't get a paycheck from this. But they come up with some really interesting ways to have the character present without having to reference the actor and to just have it be handled very differently. And it's, yeah, actually, that's kind of funny and kind of clever as a way to deal with a very gross problem. But then, okay. So Willem Dafoe's character is unnecessary, but kind of fun. Okay. He's clearly having fun at any rate. But then, okay. I'm going to put a spoiler warning up at this point, because to talk about all the mess that this is does get into more spoilers. And because I didn't know any of this going in. Almost any of it. But this is a mess of a movie that if you have an attachment to older Tim Burton's, probably worth seeing once just to see the disaster for yourself. But like, this is a mess. This thing is such a mess. There are, to my count, 4 villains in this movie. That raw number doesn't have to be a problem if they're working in conjunction, but they're not. You have 4 independent villains who are not working together. Because you've got Beetlejuice, who I do appreciate is still being treated as a threat and a villain. A fun one, but he is being treated that way, which is good to me. There's his ex-wife, played by Monica Bellucci. And I love Monica Bellucci. Great presence for this. Why is she here? Like, what? Why? Like, I cannot figure out for the life of me why she's there. There's Jeremy, the boy that Jenna Ortega's character gets a crush on. And I didn't peg him as a ghost immediately. I pegged his parents as ghosts. I got to stop using that phrase for figured stuff out. That phrase has come to mean other things. Regardless, I pegged his parents immediately as being ghosts. I didn't necessarily think that he was. I should have guessed that though. But like he's a nasty piece of work, and I get him being there. He makes sense because he, as a threat to Lydia's daughter, is the reason that she is willing to invoke Beetlejuice again. He is the threat that is direct and personal and extreme enough that Lydia is willing to bring Beetlejuice in. Cool. He has a reason to be there. But then there's Rory, Lydia's fiance. I hate this guy. And I know some people are going to be like, well, you're supposed to hate him. He's a hateable character. No. I hated every second he was on screen. Not in a you're fun to hate way, in a get off my screen way. Why is he here? Honestly, the fact that Lydia was even dating this guy, much less she barrels down the prospect of marrying him, even as everybody in her life who cares about her tells her that's a horrible idea, makes me downgrade my opinion of Lydia as a character. So not only does she have a horrible life, she's coming across like an absolute moron. No wonder your life sucks. Oh, I hated I get where he fits. Like, in terms of personality, he fits into kind of like the Maxie Dean kind of characters from the first film. So I get where he comes from and why they thought he fit in the setting. But he contributes nothing, and I freaking hate him. I hate him so much. Get him off the screen. Cut him out of the movie. He's horrible. I could not stand that guy at all. So then there's the needle drops, which are really, really weird. They're so bizarre and they're so random. Like, there's a handful of needle drops in the first one, but they're like, there's a really interesting reason why they're happening there. Here, they just kind of happen. Why? Why is that? The thing that needs to be remembered, and I think is actually important to remember, is that Tim Burton has his preferences and his aesthetics that he likes. He's not a story guy. He doesn't write scripts. So he's just waiting for someone to turn in a script that he's willing to do. And that, again, that's what this feels like. It feels like maybe Tim Burton went like, I've got other stuff to do. I can't keep waiting around for this. And they threw together this script because a lot of it just feels like it's from the standard how do we do a legacy follow-up? Well, the characters that are still around, let's acknowledge a death. Let's have this character's life be a mess. And like a lot of it feels like it's a checklist of stuff to do with a legacy sequel, and then a lot of the rest of it is just we kind of had that in the first one, but then there's the stuff like you didn't even have that in the first one. Why is that there? Like extra villains like this. The first movie is also very weird, but it gets away with it because it's the general unraveling of understanding of what is even going on and how any of this works. But the problem here is we already know how it works. So when you try and force just random weirdness, it doesn't come across as giving us a little bit more of a glimpse of what is even going on. It's just random weirdness. And I get why it's there because of what you're trying to recapture, but it's not the same effect. It's just not at all. So yeah, this thing is a hot mess. I still kind of appreciate it existing, and I actually am kind of happy it's doing pretty well because while a lot of what it does to recapture the old stuff is superficial and doesn't work, there is definitely a lot of love put into a lot of aspects of it, especially the visual side. So, like, I do feel there is more care put into this than your average, we need to milk this franchise sequel. And that alone I appreciate. But that's about it. That is about it. And I think I have my new go-to example for needless cruelty. My go-to has been Chibnall's work in Doctor Who, but while most of my audience watches Doctor Who, not everybody does. Bob. What? Why? Bob was wonderful. Bob was a small bean who should have been protected. And he's not. And there's no reason why it happens. It doesn't move the plot along in any way. It's never acknowledged by any characters. Justice for Bob. That pissed me off, actually. That actively pissed me off. The only reason I didn't fully write the movie off at that moment that happened was I thought, well, maybe when they defeat her character, the soul-sucked people will be restored and we'll get Bob back, but we don't. And so it wasn't until the very end of the movie that I realized how much I hated that. In an odd way, I'm glad I watched it. I'm never going to watch this again, though. I don't want my time back, but I don't want to devote any more time to it. The only thing I'm interested in at this point is how this happened. Because, wow, what a mess. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. All help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back the next time you need a break. And now to give thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabilex the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pau Barabajago, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I don't know, it feels right that it's October the first time you're seeing all three of these at the same time.